So if you want to grow your agency, you're going to have to invest into it. But how you ultimately invest or what money you spend or where you spend it is ultimately going to determine whether you grow intentionally or you just are burning your cash. Too many agency owners either spend based on gut feel or delay investment for too long because they aren't sure where the return or if the return is going to come or where it's going to come from. So in today's episode, I want to break down how to build a growth-ready operational budget, how to compare investments and use simple risk to value oriented lens, and how you can make some spending decisions that are aligned with your revenue, team goals, your own lifestyle goals. And it's not just a number that you're looking at, but recognizing exactly how it is that you go about that ROI of investment that you're currently making. So the first piece that I want to start with is the base operational or flat budget. So the way that I typically like to build things out is that I like to have multiple different scenarios. The first is flat of if nothing changes year over year, I stay exactly the same. Then an operational that is going to take trend into account. So what is the existing trend of the business? Am I going up? Am I going down? Am I growing by 25%? Am I growing by 50%? Like what exactly is the trajectory that I'm currently going? And if I am growing, in some examples, I have clients that are growing 50% or 100% year over year. And I don't like to plan that from an operational spend to begin with. And then you have goals and stretch goals that you would then have from there. So you have more scenario oriented budgets. So I don't want you just to look at last year's numbers and last year's goals, but I want you to look at the reality of the trend of where you're currently going and then how you were spending. And then also make sure that you're structuring the way that you're looking at things in different buckets. So the buckets that you want to look at, the amount of expense that you have is to begin with billable cost of delivery. So here's the cost that it actually takes as a percentage of total revenue. Here's the cost of the money that it takes for me to actually deliver the service. Then here's the hard cost that you have as it relates to the delivery of your service. So maybe your design softwares, it could be stock imagery, it could be if you're an events agency, it could be the cost of production of the event, that sort of thing. So here's the actual cost eventually getting to your gross margin, your gross profit. So like here's the total cost of what it takes for me to deliver, because that scales with revenue as revenue continues to grow, and it should be considered as a percentage of revenue. So making sure you have your salaries, all those sorts of things. And then you want to break down your operational expenses into a couple of different buckets. First is the cost of office, so utilities, your rents, those sorts of things. Your G&A expense, so your insurances, your office supplies, those types of things. Your administrative human resources and payroll includes benefits, that sort of stuff. And then sales and marketing. So now you have everything kind of broken into buckets, some of which scale as you grow, some of which allows for you to be able to have some economies of scale. And so the reality of it is as you start to get above the million, 1.2 million, 1.5 million in revenue, you start to have greater economies of scale and your margins are able to start to get better. So as you start to have these like different ranges in how it is that your business is operating, as you get over those thresholds, you start to be able to have the 20% percentages in your total operational cost that allows for you to be able to have higher net margins. And so the budget, and let me just clarify something that I should have said at the beginning that I didn't, is the budgets aren't just meant to track where you are, they're actually meant to guide decisions. So, hey, I'm currently trending in this area of revenue right now. Am I trending to operational? Am I trending to goal? Am I trending to stretch? Like where exactly am I throughout this year from a concentration of revenue perspective? So you may have seasonality in your business, that sort of stuff that allows for you to be able to understand where you are right now and kind of where you are headed. So as an example, the first 6 months of the year that you have throughout the year allows for you to be able to start to guide where you are in the second half of the year. So let's say that the beginning half of the year, you're a lot slower. And then the second half of the year, you tend to have the real heavy kind of months of the year from a revenue perspective. And if you start your year in a pretty high revenue oriented place, it allows for you to start to make some reasonable assumptions of where your revenue is ultimately headed for the year. And it's really useful for you to think about it this way, because it allows for you to start to see the trend. I'm not saying that I want you to blow money out of the water and that sort of thing. You want to start to make still the appropriate calculus of where you're wanting to go, but making sure that you have an understanding of what that looks like so that you can start to see what seasonality and kind of where am I headed over the course of the next 6 months. The other thing that I want to talk about is the risk to value calculus. Like exactly do you think about where do I want to invest? So as you start to grow the business, there's going to be different pieces of you, different pieces of your team that are going to be necessary. So as you start to extract yourself from different components of the business, as you start to extract yourself and want to grow revenue in this specific segment, you're wanting to have greater client attrition or client retention, lower your client attrition, and start to manage these different pieces and start to look at, if I invest in this specific capability within the organization, what does that actually mean from a time savings perspective, a capabilities perspective, a revenue perspective? So what is the actual potential upside? If this goes well, what is the potential upside? What could I potentially gain in it? And everything ultimately, there's assumptions that you're going to be making, but everything as you're going into these types of investments, there are base assumptions that you could making on what does it actually look like. So I'm going to hire a director of client service or director of accounts. That means that I should be able to assume that my client attrition that is currently at 70, my client retention is at 75. So I'm losing 25% of clients. If I make a 10% improvement, not only have I covered the salary, but I've also removed myself from needing to be involved in accounts. I'm no longer doing that. So it allows me to reinvest this time into sales, which then should mean I should be able to generate another $1 million worth of revenue because of the time that I'm able to invest in demand gen, biz dev within the organization. So like, all right, not only does that mean I'm able to add $1 million worth of client retention revenue, but I'm also able to add an additional $1 million of biz dev because of this hire. So I'm spending 100,000, let's call it 175 more likely, 200,000 for someone that's going to be leading your accounts. And then at that point, being able to remove yourself from those components and allow for you to be able to have the upside of that. And then the other thing you want to have as an understanding is what is the downside risk as well. So if I bring on this person, what does it actually have from a loss of capital, opportunity cost for you as well? What does it actually look like from a net margin perspective? How long is it going to take to get them up to speed? What are the reality of how long it's going to take to have impact? All of those sorts of pieces, and essentially just starting to understand of if it doesn't go well, what does that look like? And am I okay with that? And what does it actually look like from a timing perspective? So how long does it take for me to know if it's working or not? So when am I going to see the initial indications of the pathway for that to be successful? Or is it starting to actually become a little bit of a challenge and I need to maybe change the direction that I'm headed? And so I want to be very clear here that it's important. I take this as a very linear in my thinking, especially when it comes to numbers and finances, is that you need to make a clear decision at the time that you're starting to make that investment. You don't want to have to make a consistent different decision over time and like, hey, I've hired this person. Do I keep them on? Do I let them go? Like what actually happens depending on how you're looking at making this investment. I'm going to make an investment I'm committing to it for 3 months. Once I've committed for that 3 months, I need to see this initial indicator. So here's what it means. Here's what it would mean to let this person go. Here's what it means that I'm going to continue the test for another 3 months. Here's what it means for me to, okay, this is working. It's great. I'm going to keep this role. I'm going to continue to run into the next phase of the business. I'm looking to solve this one particular challenge. Now I can move on to the next. But make sure that you're thinking about it in what you're doing, because the reality is that if you start to invest time, money, effort into things that you can overcommit to something that ultimately isn't working. And I want to make sure that you're thinking about it in the appropriate amount of time. Now, I want you to then start to think about the ROI assumptions to start to be able to prioritize. So you may have 4, 5, 6 different potential investments in your organization or in your agency that you may want to be considering in this moment. But how do you determine which one is the right one for right now? So I would start to put them in a couple of different buckets, right? So it may be I'm going to spend $2,000 a month on this tool so that I can save 20 hours of time. It may be that I'm going to spend $5,000 worth of additional ad spend here so that I can generate more leads. And so what does it actually look like from what is the investment of time? What is the likelihood of success? What are all these components that allow for us to have an understanding of the investment? The reality is that no investment is risk-free. There's always some aspect of risk involved in it. But how do you start to prioritize the likelihood of the outcome that you're looking at? What are your immediate goals you need to be able to accomplish in order for you to be able to hit your longer term goals? And make sure that you're leveraging past data to be able to inform the decisions that you're making, right? So let's say that I'm considering the ad spend in the example I gave. I know that with the current ad spend that I have, that with each $1,000 of ad spend, I know I'm able to bring in an additional lead. Every 2 of 5, I'm able to convert into a client, which means $100,000 worth of revenue. Do I want to continue spending? I would say in that calculus, yes, you definitely do. And so how do I make that determination of what it actually makes sense as it continues to grow and scale? Like, how do I look at these potential investments, these budgets, these directional decisions that I'm making that allow for me to be able to have these components, and realizing that success is, in a lot of instances, is predicated on the focus that you have to be able to get this work done, and that you don't want to do 12 things kind of meh. You want to make sure that you're doing them well, and then you're able to focus the appropriate amount of attention that it is required in order for you to have the success within that specific component of the business. So make sure that, yes, this is going to take this amount of dollars of investment, but it's also going to take this many hours of investment. So here's the total cost that it has, opportunity cost, actual cost of salaries, including your own, and making sure you have an understanding of what that actually looks like. And then build in the appropriate amount of feedback loops, even if it's your own feedback loop to yourself. Here's the way that I'm going to look at the measurement. Here's the frequency by which I'm going to look at it, that allows for you to understand how is it that you measure the success of that, and when do you have that determination of whether it's working or not. Then the other thing, and I mentioned earlier, that you have the goal budgets. And I want you to start of kind of the outcome that you're looking for to begin with and kind of start to work your way backwards. If I'm looking to be able to grow revenue 30% this year, so that means X, Y, and Z. Here's the seasonality of my business so I can plot the revenue throughout the course of the year. And then I'm going to look at, all right, what does that actually mean for me to be able to obtain it? This amount of revenue is in project revenue. This amount of revenue is coming from retainers. This amount of revenue I currently have retained. Here's my current client retention. What does that mean from a percentage of revenue am I going to need to be able to have for my deliverable team as the percentage? So you're going to start to make loads of assumptions. It's like at this point of revenue, I know that I'm going to need to hire another PM. I may need to hire a creative director. I may need to hire an account manager. I may need to hire whomever, right? That allows for you to be able to have the right understanding of what is going to happen and when. So you can start to map out the different timing of your revenue allocation, the percentage of things, when you're going to hire people, when you're going to start to make adjustments and things based on where you currently are. And as you start to have, typically speaking, a 60 to 90 day average where you're hitting one version versus another of your budgets, whether it's your operational, your goals, or your stretch budgets, is when you start to unlock dollars that allows for you to be able to move into the next area of investment. So again, remember the purpose of this is to give you the means by which to make a determination of whether you can and should be spending within a specific segment of your business or not, allowing for you to be able to make the appropriate choices of how it is that you go about investment for growth, investment for expansion, investment for your own mental health in certain instances to be able to remove yourself from different pieces of the business. But how do you think about that investment that you're currently making in the business? When do you spend it? When do you not? What is the risk factors? How do you calculate it? How do you understand it? Because growth doesn't happen by accident. It clearly, in a lot of instances, doesn't just happen by saving money. It happens by investment. The agencies that grow sustainably are the ones that invest with intention, evaluate ROI realistically and have a clear understanding, align their budgets with their goals, not just this gut feeling oriented action, but have a clear understanding of what's going on. Use your budgets to allow for you to be able to focus your attention on where your time needs to go. The reality of being able to be focused on the purpose by which of where your time should be going and how you can actually allow yourself to be a very numbers-driven entrepreneur, agency owner that is really guided by good business fundamentals that allows for you to be able to remove yourself from the business, grow your agency well, have the right margins, and ultimately create the maximum amount of value that your agency is worth in the long term. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening in today. With all of the shifts in the industry, it is easy to feel overwhelmed or unsure of your next move. So I'm not here to try to sell you anything. I just want to give back and guide you through the uncertainty. Whether you're navigating new trends or just need some clarity, we're here to listen and offer advice. Head to creativeagencysuccess.com/chat to book a free 15-minute chat with an agency mentor who can provide you with a fresh perspective. Let's figure out the best steps for your agency's growth together.